that genetically are even greater than we are now. We also have to look at the fact, and I mentioned this briefly in the lesson, the difference between micro and macroevolution. Just to say all evolution is wrong is a false statement anyway. Microevolution deals with minute changes within a species. Macroevolution deals with and suggests that there is an absolute change in species, from one species to another. Let me illustrate microevolution this way. I know some of you in here very likely are farmers, or you farm a garden. Years ago I had a garden. One place I lived, I wanted to grow some corn, green beans, and some other fruits and vegetables. One of the men where I lived at that time told me, he said, you need to plant this type of corn. And I want to tell you where you can go and get this type of green bean. What happened in the process of people developing and growing corn was these horticulturists did some changing. We call them, they made hybrid forms of them, which is a mutation within that particular species to develop a different kind of corn. So some corns are white kernels, some are yellow. This was a mixture of both. Very sweet corn, very good type of corn. I did that and enjoyed it. On the green bean, produced a larger green bean just by the hibernation or the hybrid process. They made hybrid plants. So within that species, they were able to inject various things, make hybrid plants of this, but it's still, when I put the seed in the ground, it came up a green bean. It didn't come up a watermelon. It didn't change to a different type. Just as the Bible suggests, Genesis chapter 1, that everything produces after its own kind. That's, as Bruce suggested a moment ago, that is why apes do not have humans. Everything produces after its own kind. But there are changes in microevolution within a species, and we do recognize that. And it would be actually unfair and dishonest to say otherwise. The problem is we need fair dealings with these particular subjects, accurate dealings with them. We don't need those who are dishonest, or those who take a piece of this and a piece of that and automatically form what has been done in science in the past. It's not to say that all scientists are dishonest, but there has been some dishonest science that have taken place to try to prove evolution. One, the Piltdown man. Another, Lucy. Lucy was actually a small piece of a skull, where they found this little piece, and then in other regions around they found other either partial or full skulls and said, well, Lucy must be this. So they formed the skull and said, this is the missing link between man and ape. Something that is going to be done not only accurately, but honestly, would say, we found a small piece of skull, and that's all we have. Rather than to take into a laboratory and mold with clay a skull and say, this is the link between man and ape. Now that is, again, not to say that all science is dishonest, but there has been some dishonest science in the past to try to prove evolution. All that, not only myself, but others who study these things would ask, let's be honest in it. And with honest dialogue and with honest study and honest results of the study, one could determine what is right and what is wrong without having to manufacture fake things. Now there have been other things found. Last year while in London, I did go to the Natural Museum of History in London. There wasn't a case, David was with me, he saw it as well, and several others. There wasn't a case, if I'm not mistaken, David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 5 skulls, which of course they're replica skulls. One said ape, Neanderthal man, or like an ape man. This is coming to be man, then man. All 5 skulls looked identical. And when you looked at that skull and went on down in that section, on the second floor of this building, in the main hall, then there were skulls of humans. If you walked 20 to 30 feet and looked at the 5 or 6 skulls in one case, and and then the skulls in another case, you could see a vast difference. You could tell the 5 skulls together were ape skulls. To say that the third one or the fourth one was the product of the evolution between ape and man and have the same looking skull is a very far stretch. Then to take the human skull several feet down and say this is a human is to show this is a human, but you know those 2 skulls did not look alike. It did not take very much study of those skulls to see the difference. Although there are similarities, there are vast differences as well. But we need to be objective and honest in what we do in all of our research. Now, I don't know if that completely answered that question. I hope it did. If not, we can follow up with that. He's got a microphone.
Oh, that's all right.
You're going to say something? Yeah, we'll record it. I think he has a question. Did you have a comment about that?
Just had a comment about macro versus micro.
Okay, go ahead.
From here?
Microphone.
Oh,
So over at the judge.
Fine microphone.
I just wanted to comment.
That's a microphone and nothing else.
What he's talking about was microevolution and macroevolution. A couple of good examples would be metamorphosis, adaptation. Those are changes within a species. They are not, should not be considered at all with macroevolution. Another good point about that also is that those 2 things, adaptation and metamorphosis, don't take a lot of time, which evolutionists need in macroevolution. So I want to make those comments.
Back on that question as well, I read from this website for a reason. If evolutionary processes have speeded up tremendously as a new study that was based on scientific, I guess, their evidence or their own beliefs, if it has speeded up rapidly, the difference between man and ape would be not a gradual process over millions and millions or hundreds of millions of years. It would speed that process up tremendously, so we should be seeing that more. That was the point I was going to make, and I didn't get back to that. But if it does, or is the case, that it is rapidly going, we will be seeing it. But since we haven't seen it, that should give us more indication that it's not true. Or otherwise we would be able to see it, whether going into jungles and finding it in a zoo. We have apes and monkeys all in the zoos around this area and everywhere else. There should be a speeding up process with them as well. We should be able to see that.
Bruce asked me to mention to anybody that wants a copy of the proposition that he put up here from the Warren Food Debate. He'll be glad to make you a copy of it if you'd like it. Get to my question here, please. Got a couple of questions, well, really about 3, something like that, but I'll try to get to it as quick as I can. Explain how God is eternal and what that means. Well, eternal means without beginning or ending. To understand the eternality of God fully and completely as a finite being, I don't think you can. Because it just simply means without beginning. And just forever in existence without a beginning at all. Well, our minds are set to beginning and ending. So explain how. I can't explain how. He's deity. I could turn around and say, explain how matter is eternal. You can't. Because in reality, everything contained inside of the laws, there's matter at a beginning. What it means? Well, if you're talking about the first cause that is uncaused, that's where you have to go back to. Now, which is more reasonable to say that matter